The text message arrived like a dagger to the heart, a single, blurry photo from a gossip blog. It was the night of the Starlight Foundation Gala, the one night Ethan insisted he had to attend alone for critical networking. The photo showed him smiling, his arm wrapped possessively around the waist of Isabella Vance, his new, much too young marketing prodigy. For his wife Amelia, the image didn't just confirm a suspicion, it shattered a universe. For weeks, she had been nursing a secret of her own, a tiny, fluttering hope she believed would mend the growing chasm between them. Now, that hope felt like a foolish, naive dream. But as the tears streamed down her face, a different feeling began to burn through the pain. A cold, hard resolve. He would not break her. She wiped her eyes, made a phone call, and slipped into the emerald green dress she'd saved for a happier occasion. The silence in their penthouse apartment was a living thing. It seeped into the plush white carpets and clung to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. For Amelia, the silence was louder than any argument. It was the sound of Ethan's absence, a void that had been growing for the better part of a year. Ethan Blackwood hadn't just built a real estate empire, he had constructed a persona. He was the self-made millionaire, the visionary, the man whose ambition was a furnace that burned day and night. When Amelia had married him 5 years ago, she'd been drawn to that fire. Now she only felt its heat when it was turned on her, in moments of criticism, impatience, or worse, indifference. Their life was a meticulously curated collection of beautiful things. Art they never discussed, a library of books they never read together, a state-of-the-art kitchen where only the cleaning staff ever cooked. It was a gilded cage, and Amelia was beginning to feel its bars press in on her. 2 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning while Ethan was in Singapore closing a deal, Amelia's world had tilted on its axis. Alone in their marble-clad bathroom, she stared at 2 pink lines on a plastic stick. Pregnant. The wave of emotion that washed over her was so complex, it left her breathless. There was sheer, unadulterated joy, a primal happiness that made her want to sing. But it was immediately followed by a chilling dread. How do you tell a man who schedules his life in 15-minute increments that it's about to be permanently disrupted? How do you share the most intimate, wonderful news with a husband who has started to feel like a stranger? She decided to wait. She would tell him at the perfect moment, a moment so full of love and hope that it would have to remind him of the man he used to be. The man who had once looked at her as if she were the only person in the world. The Starlight Foundation Gala seemed like that moment. It was their anniversary. Surely he wouldn't forget. "You're going to the gala, right?" She'd asked him a week prior, her voice more hopeful than she intended. Ethan didn't look up from his tablet, scrolling through market reports. "Can't. It's a work night, Amelia. I need to be focused. I'm taking Isabella, my new head of marketing. We need to schmooze with the Vanguard group. She's better at that stuff anyway." The casual cruelty of his words stole her breath. Not just that he wasn't taking her, but the effortless way he mentioned Isabella's name. Isabella Vance. Young, ambitious, beautiful, and as Amelia was beginning to suspect, the reason for the long nights, the last-minute business trips, and the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his shirts. "It's our anniversary, Ethan," she said softly. He finally looked up, his expression one of mild irritation, as if she'd just pointed out a smudge on a window. "I know. We'll celebrate this weekend. I'll have my assistant book something." He stood up, kissed the top of her head in a gesture so dismissive it felt like a pat, and walked out of the room. That night, Amelia cried herself to sleep, clutching the ultrasound photo she had hidden in her bedside table. The plan was dead. There would be no perfect moment. There was only the cold reality of their life. And then came the text. The photo. It was from her sister Chloe with a simple, gut-wrenching caption. "I am so sorry, Ames." There he was. Her husband. On a night he'd claimed was for work, posing on a red carpet with his arm around another woman. Isabella was glowing, basking in the flashbulbs, looking every bit the part of the billionaire's partner. Ethan was beaming, a proud, possessive smile on his face that Amelia hadn't seen directed at her in years. The heartbreak was a physical force, knocking the air from her lungs. She sank to the floor, the sobs racking her body. It was a confirmation of every fear, every whispered doubt, every lonely night spent wondering where she had gone wrong. But after the storm of grief came a strange, unnerving calm. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. A tear-streaked face. A woman who had made herself small to fit into a man's oversized world. Then, her hand instinctively went to her stomach. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She stood up, her movements deliberate. She walked to her closet and pulled out the emerald green dress, a silk gown that shimmered like liquid jade. It was a dress of strength, of confidence, a dress for a woman who was nobody's victim. Her hands were shaking as she scrolled through her contacts, her thumb hovering over a name she hadn't called in a long time. Daniel Ashford. He had been a friend from her old life before Ethan, a kind, brilliant man who had just been named CEO of a rival tech firm. They had lost touch, but she knew he was on the board of the Starlight Foundation. She knew he would be there. She took a deep breath and pressed call. "Daniel, it's Amelia. Amelia Blackwood." Her voice was fragile but steady. "I know this is incredibly last minute, but I find myself in need of a partner for the Starlight Gala." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Amelia," he said, his voice warm and concerned. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Not really," she confessed, a single tear escaping. "But I'm hoping to make it better." The grand ballroom of the Monarch Hotel was a universe of its own, glittering with chandeliers and buzzing with the low hum of power and influence. It was a room where fortunes were made and reputations were cemented. Tonight, it would be a room where a life was publicly detonated. Ethan Blackwood was in his element. With a glass of champagne in one hand and Isabella on his arm, he felt invincible. He moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a king in his court. Isabella was a perfect accessory, stunning in a crimson dress, sharp enough to impress his colleagues and demure enough not to outshine him. He introduced her as his brilliant protégé, a title that carried a smirk only those in his inner circle understood. "Ethan, you're looking well." A rival developer clapped him on the shoulder. "And this must be the marketing genius you've been telling everyone about." "Isabella Vance," Ethan said, pulling her closer. "She's the future of the company." Isabella blushed prettily. It was exactly the performance Ethan was paying for, in more ways than one. He felt a surge of pride, of ownership. This was success. This was what he had worked for. He was in the middle of a story about a recent acquisition, his voice booming, when a subtle shift occurred in the room. A wave of whispers started near the grand entrance, rippling through the crowd like a current. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. Ethan, annoyed by the interruption, glanced toward the door, and then his world stopped. Framed in the arched entryway was Amelia. She was breathtaking. The emerald green dress clung to her curves, a vibrant splash of life in a sea of black and navy tuxedos. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her makeup was flawless, highlighting the defiant fire in her eyes. She looked regal, powerful, and utterly serene. But it wasn't just her appearance that froze the blood in Ethan's veins. It was the man whose hand she was holding. Daniel Ashford. The newly minted CEO of Sterling Digital, one of the most respected and powerful men in the tech industry. Daniel wasn't just a competitor. He was a benchmark for a different kind of success. One built on integrity and innovation, not just ruthless ambition. He stood beside Amelia, his presence a quiet shield. He wasn't showing her off. He was supporting her. His gaze swept the room with a calm authority that made Ethan's own posturing feel cheap and desperate. The whispers in the room grew louder. "Is that Amelia Blackwood? With Daniel Ashford? But I thought Ethan was here with—" The pieces clicked into place for everyone at the same time. The narrative of the evening was instantly rewritten. Ethan Blackwood, the titan of industry, wasn't just networking with his brilliant protégé. He was publicly flaunting his mistress while his stunning, pregnant wife, a fact that became subtly apparent in the way the silk draped over her abdomen, arrived on the arm of a more respected man. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. The champagne glass felt heavy, stupid in his hand. Isabella, sensing the shift, stiffened beside him. The adoring look on her face curdled into one of confusion and anxiety. Amelia's eyes found Ethan's across the crowded room. There was no hatred in her gaze, no hysteria. There was something far worse, a calm, pitying disappointment. It was a look that said, "This is what you've chosen, and this is what you've lost." Daniel leaned in and whispered something to Amelia, a gesture of pure tenderness. She nodded, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. Then, as if Ethan and Isabella didn't even exist, they began to move through the room, greeting people. But they weren't just greeting people. They were holding court. Figures who had been clamoring for Ethan's attention just moments before now turned to intercept Daniel and Amelia, eager to speak with the new power couple of the evening. The humiliation was a physical burn. Ethan was trapped in the spotlight he had so desperately craved, but its glare was now exposing him as a fool. He saw it all in that moment. The cheapness of his affair with Isabella, the profound depth of his betrayal, the sheer staggering loss that Amelia's quiet dignity represented. He had come to the gala to show off his power. Instead, his pregnant wife had arrived, holding hands with a better man, and in one silent, devastating moment, had shown him what true power looked like. It wasn't about who you owned. It was about who you were. And as he stood there, frozen beside his mistress, Ethan Blackwood began to understand that he was nothing at all. The ride home was a silent, suffocating ordeal. Ethan had mumbled a pathetic excuse to Isabella, leaving her in the care of a junior executive before practically fleeing the gala. He found Amelia by the valet, waiting calmly beside Daniel's sleek, understated sedan. "I'll take her home," Ethan had said, his voice raw. Daniel looked at Amelia, a question in his eyes. It was her choice. "It's all right, Daniel. Thank you. For everything," she said, her voice full of genuine gratitude. She gave his hand a final firm squeeze before turning to face Ethan. The moment the doors of their penthouse closed, the silence erupted. "What the hell was that, Amelia?" Ethan's voice was a low growl, a desperate attempt to seize control by manufacturing anger. "You wanted to embarrass me? You wanted to make a scene?" Amelia didn't flinch. She placed her clutch on the marble console table and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "A scene? You mean like the one you were making with your arm around Isabella Vance on the red carpet? Don't you dare try to twist this. You embarrassed yourself, Ethan. I just refuse to be collateral damage." "She's my employee. It was a work function," he lied, and the lie was so flimsy, so insulting, that it hung in the air between them like poison. "Stop," Amelia said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Just stop lying, to me and to yourself. I saw the photo before I even left. I know what's been going on, the late nights, the business trips, the way you look right through me. I'm not a fool." Ethan's manufactured rage crumbled, replaced by a flailing panic. "It didn't mean anything, Ames. It was a mistake. A stupid distraction." "A distraction?" she repeated, her voice finally cracking with the weight of her pain. "For how long, Ethan? Months? A year? Was I a distraction when you bought her a condo downtown? Was I a distraction when you forgot our anniversary, but remembered to buy her jewelry? She wasn't guessing. Her sister's private investigator had been thorough. Ethan staggered back as if struck. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how," she said, tears now streaming down her face. "What matters is that our marriage has been a lie. Our life has been a lie. I've been living in this beautiful empty box, waiting for a husband who was out building a new life with someone else." She took a ragged breath, her hand moving to rest protectively on her stomach. "And the worst part, the most cruel part of it all, is that I was going to tell you tonight. I thought the gala, our anniversary, I thought it would be the perfect time to tell you that I'm pregnant." The word hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. Pregnant. Ethan stared at her, his mind struggling to process the information. A baby. They were having a baby. The foundation of his carefully constructed world disintegrated into dust. All his justifications, all his selfish rationalizations, they all turned to ash in the face of that one monumental truth. He hadn't just cheated on his wife, he had betrayed the mother of his child. "Amelia, I didn't know," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He took a step toward her, his hand outstretched. "No!" she cried, recoiling. "Don't you touch me! You don't get to do that! You don't get to find out and suddenly pretend to care!" "Of course I care," he insisted, desperation clawing at his throat. "This changes everything." "Yes, it does," she agreed, her voice hardening again, the tears stopping as a new resolve settled over her. "It changes everything for me. It solidifies what I have to do. I'm leaving you, Ethan." The finality in her voice was absolute. "I'm not raising our child in this house. I won't raise him or her to see this as normal, to see a mother who is ignored and a father who is whatever you are. We're done." She walked past him, heading for the bedroom. The argument was over. The verdict had been delivered. Ethan stood alone in the vast living room, the city lights twinkling mockingly outside. He was surrounded by millions of dollars of art and furniture, but the only thing he could see was the image of Amelia's face, her quiet strength, and the protective hand on the baby he had never known was coming. He had thought he had everything, and in the space of a single evening, he had lost it all. The first 24 hours after Amelia left were a blur of denial. Ethan woke up expecting to see her, to smell the coffee she always made, but the penthouse was sterile, eerily quiet. Her scent was already fading from the pillows. Her side of the closet was a gaping wound, stripped bare of her clothes, her shoes, her life. He called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. He texted. No reply. He called her sister Chloe, who answered with a voice dripping with ice. "She doesn't want to talk to you, Ethan." "Chloe, please, I need to speak with her. We have to talk about the baby." "You had 5 years to talk to her," Chloe snapped. "You'll be hearing from her lawyer." The line went dead. Her lawyer. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a temporary separation. This was an amputation. The next phase was a desperate, pathetic attempt to fix things the only way he knew how, with money and power. He had his assistant send a ridiculously expensive floral arrangement to Chloe's house. It was sent back, refused. He tried to have a brand new, top-of-the-line SUV delivered for her. The delivery was rejected. His world began to unravel. He went to the office, but he couldn't focus. The numbers on the screen blurred. The smug faces of his executives grated on his nerves. He saw judgment in every glance, pity in every polite inquiry about how he was doing. The story of the gala was the worst-kept secret in their social and professional circles. That afternoon, Isabella came into his office, closing the door behind her. "Ethan, we need to talk about what happened," she began, her voice a mixture of hurt and entitlement. "You just left me there. People are saying..." Ethan looked at her. And for the first time, He saw her clearly. He saw the naked ambition, the calculated adoration. He saw a young woman who had attached herself to his success, a reflection of his own ego. The allure, the excitement, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a stale, transactional ugliness. She wasn't the cause of his problems. She was a symptom of his own moral bankruptcy. "It's over, Isabella," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Pack your things. My HR department will work out a generous severance package. I want you out of this building by the end of the day." Her face went from shock to fury. "You're firing me, after everything! You can't just throw me away like this!" "I can, and I am," he said coldly. "You were a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Isabella wasn't the mistake. The mistake was him. The mistake was the man who had thought a woman like her could fill the void inside him. Getting rid of her brought no relief. The guilt didn't subside. It intensified. He was alone now, truly alone, in the wreckage he had created. The nights were the worst. The giant, empty bed was a torment. He'd walk through the penthouse, from room to room, haunted by memories. A faint echo of Amelia's laughter in the media room. The ghost of her presence in the library. He started drinking. Not socially, but methodically, purposefully, trying to numb the relentless voice in his head that told him he was a failure, a fraud, a man who had destroyed the only good thing in his life. He'd stare at the single ultrasound photo the private investigator had found for him. A grainy, black and white image of a tiny, nascent life. His child. A child who would grow up hearing stories about how their father had humiliated their mother. This was his rock bottom. A vast, empty penthouse, a bottle of scotch, and the crushing, suffocating weight of his own guilt. He had built an empire of glass and steel, but his own character was made of sand, and now it was all washing away. He had to change. Not to win Amelia back. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he had lost that right, but because the man he saw in the mirror was someone he could no longer stand to be. While Ethan was drowning, Amelia was learning to breathe again. The first few days at her sister Chloe's suburban home were a cocoon of grief. She slept, she cried, and she let herself feel the full, agonizing weight of the betrayal. Chloe was her rock, fielding calls, making tea, and providing a space where Amelia didn't have to pretend to be strong. But after the grief came a quiet, determined focus. Her baby was her anchor. Every decision, every action was now filtered through a single question. What is best for my child? Staying a victim was not the answer. She met with a formidable divorce attorney, a woman who specialized in high-asset cases. The lawyer laid out the stark reality of what she was entitled to, but Amelia steered the conversation in a different direction. "I don't want to punish him," Amelia said, her voice clear and firm. "I don't want a war. I want what's fair, but more than that, I want to build a stable, peaceful life for my baby. The goal isn't revenge, it's freedom." Her biggest asset wasn't Ethan's money. It was her own mind. Before marrying Ethan, Amelia had been a brilliant architectural historian with a budding career. She had given it up, convinced by Ethan that his success could be their project. Now she realized she had outsourced her ambition, and it was time to reclaim it. She called Daniel Ashford. "I need your advice," she said, meeting him for coffee in a quiet cafe far from their old haunts. "And maybe a favor." "Anything, Amelia," he said, his expression one of pure, uncomplicated support. "Before I met Ethan, I was working on a proposal for a foundation dedicated to preserving historical architecture in rapidly developing cities. It was my passion," she explained. "I want to revive it. I want to build something that is mine." Daniel listened intently, his respect for her visibly growing. He didn't offer to solve her problems or throw money at her. He offered something better. His expertise. He connected her with business planners, nonprofit specialists, and potential donors from his own network. "You have the vision, Amelia," he told her, reviewing her old proposal, which she had updated with a new, sharper focus. "You just need the right framework. This is brilliant." Their meetings became a regular occurrence. They were professional, focused, and deeply respectful. Daniel was the antithesis of Ethan. He listened. He valued her intellect. He saw her not as an extension of a powerful man, but as a powerful woman in her own right. There was an easy chemistry between them, a warmth that soothed the raw edges of her heartbreak. But it was rooted in friendship and mutual admiration, not romance. He was helping her stand on her own 2 feet, not sweeping her off them. Slowly, a new Amelia began to emerge. She traded grief for determination. She moved into a charming, light-filled apartment of her own, one that felt more like a home in 2 weeks than the penthouse ever had in 5 years. She poured her energy into her foundation, securing initial funding and building a board of directors. Her work gave her purpose, a sense of identity that was entirely her own. The first official communication from Ethan's lawyers arrived. It was aggressive, posturing, an attempt to intimidate. Amelia, with her lawyer's guidance, sent back a calm, firm response, refusing to be drawn into a fight. Her turning point came during the first mediation session, held in a sterile conference room. Ethan was there, looking haggard and thin. He tried to speak to her directly, his voice thick with a rehearsed apology. Amelia looked at him, and for the first time she felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, just a distant pity. She saw a man trapped by his own bad choices. "Ethan," she said, cutting him off, her voice steady and professional. "Let's just let the lawyers handle the details. My focus is on a peaceful co-parenting plan for our child." He recoiled as if she had slapped him. He had come prepared for a fight, for tears, for a dramatic confrontation. He was not prepared for this cool, capable stranger who was building a new life without him. He realized then that his money couldn't buy her forgiveness. His apologies couldn't undo the damage. He wasn't dealing with the wife he had left behind. He was facing a woman who had already moved on. The climb back wouldn't just be about winning her over. It would be about becoming a man worthy of being in her new world at all. The mediation was a brutal awakening for Ethan. Amelia's calm indifference was a mirror showing him the man he had become. Pathetic, desperate, and utterly powerless to fix what he had broken. That night, for the first time in weeks, he didn't reach for a bottle. He reached for the phone and found the number for a therapist his own company's EAP program recommended, a man who specialized in narcissistic personality traits and executive burnout. The first session was excruciating. Ethan, a man used to commanding rooms, found himself stammering, unable to articulate the depth of his failure without resorting to excuses. "She left because I had an affair," he said. "No," Dr. Morrison replied calmly. "The affair was a symptom. She left because of the man you chose to be. Let's talk about him." Over the next few months, Ethan did the hardest work of his life. It wasn't about closing deals or acquiring properties. It was about dismantling his own ego. He was forced to confront the deep-seated insecurity that drove his relentless ambition, his need for external validation. From women, from the business community, from the size of his bank account, was a compensation for a profound lack of self-worth. He learned that his affair with Isabella wasn't about passion. It was about control and validation. He had treated Amelia's love not as a gift to be cherished, but as an asset he had already acquired, allowing him to focus on the next conquest. The change was slow, almost imperceptible at first. It started not with grand gestures, but with small, consistent actions. He instructed his lawyer to stop all aggressive tactics immediately. "Give her everything she wants," he said. "My only non-negotiable term is a structured co-parenting plan that puts the child first." He learned from Chloe that Amelia had a prenatal appointment. He didn't show up to ambush her. Instead, he went an hour later, spoke to the receptionist, and asked if the doctor could spare 5 minutes to give him an update on the health of the baby. He left his number, expecting nothing. To his surprise, the doctor called, impressed by the respectful approach. He established a trust fund for the baby, not in his own name, but in Amelia's, giving her full control. He sent the documents to her lawyer with a simple handwritten note. "This is for our child." No strings attached. He sold the cavernous penthouse, a symbol of the hollow life he had built. He moved into a smaller, more functional apartment near the park. He started running in the mornings, not to train for a marathon, but to clear his head. He started reading the books in his new, smaller library. He began to transform his business, shifting the focus from ruthless growth to sustainable, ethical development. He fired the sycophants and promoted the people with integrity, the ones who had been brave enough to question him. He didn't do any of this with the expectation that it would win Amelia back. He did it because he was building a version of himself that he could live with. He was trying to become a man his child could one day respect. He was still in the dark, but for the first time, he was walking toward a pinprick of light, not for her, but for himself. And he knew, with a painful clarity, that was the only way he'd ever be worthy of being a father. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in April. It was Chloe. "She's in labor, St. Mary's Hospital." Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. He grabbed the small pre-packed bag by his door, a bag containing nothing but a change of clothes, a phone charger, and a small worn copy of a book on fatherhood his therapist had given him. When he arrived at the hospital, he didn't storm the delivery room. He found the waiting area, checked in with the nurse, and said, "Please just let Chloe know I'm here, if Amelia needs anything, or if she's willing to see me. No pressure." An hour later, Chloe appeared. Her expression was tired but neutral. "She's asking for you." The delivery room was a bubble of quiet intensity. Amelia was exhausted but radiant, her strength awe-inspiring. Daniel was there, sitting quietly in a corner, a calm, supportive presence who had clearly been tasked with fetching water and offering words of encouragement. He nodded at Ethan, a gesture of respect, not rivalry. Ethan's presence was awkward, tentative. He stayed by the wall, trying to be invisible, to offer support without intrusion. He was a spectator at the most important event of his life. After 18 hours of grueling labor, at 9:53 p.m., Lily Grace Blackwood was born. The sound of her first cry shattered the tension in the room, replacing it with a wave of pure, overwhelming love. The nurse cleaned her and wrapped her in a blanket before placing her on Amelia's chest. Amelia wept, her tears no longer of sorrow, but of profound joy. After a few moments, she looked up, her gaze finding Ethan's. He was frozen, tears streaming down his own face. "Would you?" Amelia's voice was hoarse. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" His breath hitched. He nodded, unable to speak. He washed his hands, his movements clumsy, and walked over to the bed. Amelia carefully transferred the tiny, warm bundle into his arms. The moment Ethan held Lily, his entire universe recalibrated. He looked down at her perfect miniature face, her impossibly small fingers that curled around his thumb. This tiny being was a part of him. In that instant, all the ambition, the money, the deals, the betrayals, it all became meaningless noise. The only thing that mattered was this child. A wave of protective love so fierce it buckled his knees washed over him. He understood, in a way no therapy session could ever teach him, what he had almost thrown away. He looked at Amelia, his eyes conveying a universe of regret, gratitude, and awe. "Thank you," he whispered, the words thick with unshed tears. "She's perfect." Amelia gave him a small, tired smile. It wasn't a smile of forgiveness, not yet. But it was a smile of acknowledgement, a recognition that in this room, they were not a broken couple. They were two parents, bound forever by the miracle in his arms. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a new beginning. The year that followed was a masterclass in messy, beautiful, complicated grace. Co-parenting was not a seamless transition. It was a series of awkward handoffs, mismatched schedules, and late-night phone calls about fevers and feeding habits. But through it all, a new dynamic began to form, built on a foundation of one thing: Ethan's unwavering consistency. He never missed a handoff. He was never late. He learned Lily's schedule, her favorite lullabies, the specific way she liked to be held. He respected every boundary Amelia set. When he picked Lily up, he never tried to linger or push for conversation. He would simply thank Amelia, ask if she needed anything, and focus entirely on their daughter. Daniel remained a steadfast part of Amelia's life, a true friend and a mentor for her now thriving foundation. Ethan, the old Ethan, would have been consumed by jealousy. The new Ethan felt only a quiet gratitude that Amelia and his daughter had such a good man in their lives. He understood that Daniel's role was not a threat to his, it was a benefit to Lily's. The true turning point came on Lily's first birthday. Amelia hosted a small party in the backyard of Chloe's house. It was a simple affair with family and a few close friends. Ethan was invited, and he came bearing not an extravagant gift, but a simple, handcrafted wooden rocking horse he had spent months making in a woodworking class. He watched from the edge of the small crowd as Amelia, glowing with happiness, helped Lily open her presents. He saw her laughing with Daniel, a laugh of easy friendship. He felt a pang, not of jealousy, but of a deep, sorrowful understanding of what he had lost. Later, as the guests began to leave, Amelia found him sitting on the porch, watching Lily sleep in her carrier. "She had a good day," Amelia said, sitting in the chair beside him. "She did," Ethan agreed softly. "You've done an amazing job, Amelia. You're an incredible mother." A comfortable silence settled between them, something that would have been impossible a year ago. "The rocking horse is beautiful, Ethan," she said. "I wanted her to have something real, something that wasn't just bought," he replied, looking at his hands. "Amelia, I know I've said I'm sorry before, but I don't think I ever said it right. I'm not sorry because I got caught. I'm not sorry because I lost you. I am sorry for the pain I caused you, for the disrespect, for taking your love and your light for granted. I was a broken man, and I broke the best thing that ever happened to me. There's not a day that goes by that I don't regret the man I was." Amelia listened, and for the first time she heard no excuses, no justifications. She heard only pure, unvarnished truth. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. "I know, Ethan," she said softly. "I see the man you are now, and he is a good father." Tears welled in his eyes, and he didn't hide them. It wasn't forgiveness in the way a movie would portray it. They weren't going to fall back into each other's arms. The romantic love was gone, lost in the fire of his betrayal. But in its place was something else, something quieter, more durable. It was respect. It was partnership. It was a new kind of family, forged in the crucible of heartbreak and rebuilt with the hard work of redemption. They sat there together, watching their daughter sleep as the sun went down. Two people who had found their way not back to each other, but to a place of peace. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations. It's about finding strength in heartbreak, the long and difficult road to redemption, and redefining what it means to be a family. True change isn't about grand gestures, but about the quiet, consistent work of becoming a better person. What did you think of Ethan's journey and Amelia's strength? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like this video, share this story with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that touch the heart.
Billionaire offers waitress $1 million to quit her job. Her reply leaves him speechless. What if a single conversation could change everything you believed about success and happiness? Claire Martinez wiped down the same corner booth for the third time that evening, her tired hands moving in familiar circles across the worn formica. At 36, she'd been serving coffee and comfort food at Murphy's Diner for nearly 15 years, watching customers come and go while her own dreams seemed to fade with each passing year. The autumn rain drummed against the windows, creating rivulets that caught the warm glow of the neon sign outside. She didn't notice the expensive black sedan that pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, or the man in the tailored suit who stepped carefully around puddles as he approached the glass door. James Richardson had built an empire worth $3 billion, but tonight he looked like any other weary traveler seeking shelter from the storm. Little did either of them know that the next hour would shatter everything they thought they understood about what truly matters in life. "Where are you watching from tonight?" The brass bell above the door chimed softly as James entered, shaking droplets from his coat. Claire looked up from behind the counter, offering the same warm smile she'd perfected over years of late-night shifts. "Welcome to Murphy's," she said, her voice carrying genuine kindness despite her exhaustion. "Sit anywhere you'd like, honey." He chose a booth near the window, sliding across the cracked vinyl seat while glancing around the modest diner. Everything here seemed untouched by time: the checkered floor tiles, the handwritten menu board, the photos of longtime customers covering one entire wall. Claire approached with a steaming pot of coffee, automatically flipping his cup right side up. "Rough night?" she asked, noticing the tension in his shoulders. James nodded, surprised by her perceptiveness. "Something like that," he murmured. As she poured, he caught sight of the small nameplate pinned to her uniform and the calluses on her hands that spoke of countless hours of honest work. "Claire, is it?" She smiled, tucking a strand of graying hair behind her ear. "That's right. Been here so long, some folks think I came with the furniture." Over the next 20 minutes, James found himself drawn into easy conversation. Claire moved between his table and her other duties with practiced grace, refilling his cup and sharing stories about the diner's colorful history. She spoke of Mrs. Henderson, who came in every Tuesday for apple pie, and memories of her late husband, and young Danny, who studied for his college exams in the back booth every night after his construction job. "This place has seen 3 generations of families," Claire said with pride. "Some of my regulars, I've watched their babies grow up and have babies of their own." James studied her face as she spoke, seeing something he'd forgotten existed in his world of boardrooms and profit margins: genuine contentment. "Don't you ever want more?" he asked suddenly. The question hung in the air between them. Claire paused, considering. "More what?" she replied softly. Before James could answer, his phone buzzed with yet another urgent message from his assistant. The reminder of his outside world felt jarring here, like a discordant note in a peaceful symphony. He looked at Claire, then at the phone, feeling a strange pull he couldn't quite name. James silenced his phone and studied Claire more intently. "What I mean is," he continued carefully, "don't you ever think about leaving all this behind? Traveling the world, buying whatever you want, never having to worry about money again." Claire laughed, a sound as warm as the coffee she poured. "Mister, you sound like someone who's got plenty of money but might be missing something else entirely." Her words hit closer to home than James expected. "I'm James Richardson," he said quietly, watching for recognition in her eyes. When none came, he felt oddly relieved. "I own Richardson Industries." Claire nodded politely, but clearly the name meant nothing to her. In her world of regular customers and modest tips, billionaires were as foreign as astronauts. "That sounds important," she said kindly, topping off his coffee again. James leaned forward, his voice taking on the tone he used in crucial negotiations. "Claire, what if I told you I could change your life tonight? What if I offered you enough money to never have to work another day, to buy a house anywhere you wanted, to travel and see everything you've dreamed of?" Claire's hand stilled on the coffee pot handle. "What exactly are you saying?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly. $1 million, James said, his eyes fixed on hers. "Cash. Tomorrow. All you have to do is walk away from this place and never look back." The diner seemed to grow quieter around them, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Claire set the coffee pot down slowly, her mind reeling. $1 million. She thought of her tiny apartment above the hardware store, the bills that kept her awake at night, the dreams she'd tucked away like old photographs. But then she looked around the diner, at Mrs. Henderson's favorite booth, at the wall of family photos, at the coffee-stained order pad where she'd written down thousands of simple requests over the years. "You want me to abandon the people who depend on me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The folks who come here not just for food, but for someone who remembers how they like their eggs, who asks about their grandchildren, who listens when they need to talk?" If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. James watched the emotions play across her face, realizing he'd stepped into something far more complex than a simple business transaction. What would Claire's answer be, and why did it suddenly matter so much to a man who thought he had everything? Claire walked to the window, staring out at the rain-soaked street where James's expensive car gleamed under the streetlight. $1 million. The number echoed in her mind like a prayer and a curse all at once. She thought about her mother's medical bills, the ones she'd been paying off slowly for 3 years since the cancer treatment. She thought about her daughter Jessica, working 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school while raising Claire's grandson alone after her husband left. "You don't understand," she said finally, turning back to James. "This isn't just a job to me. When Mr. Murphy was dying, he made me promise to keep this place alive. He said it was the heart of the neighborhood, the one place where everyone was family." Her voice cracked slightly. "I've got customers who eat here because it's the only place they can afford a hot meal. I've got elderly folks who come in just so someone will talk to them. You're asking me to turn my back on all of that for money." James felt something uncomfortable stirring in his chest. "But think about your own family," he pressed. "Your own future. With that money, you could help more people than you ever could slinging coffee." Claire's eyes flashed. "You think because you've got money, you understand what really helps people?" When Mrs. Patterson lost her husband last winter, did money hold her hand while she cried into her coffee? When teenage Kevin was thinking about dropping out of school, did a check talk him through his troubles every night for 2 months until he got back on track? "That's noble," James said, his businessman's instincts kicking in, "but nobility doesn't pay the bills." The words sounded hollow, even to him, as soon as they left his mouth. Claire studied his face with the kind of perception that came from years of reading people's hearts. "When's the last time you had a conversation like this?" she asked gently. "When's the last time someone looked you in the eye and saw James the person, not Richardson Industries?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. James realized that in the past 5 years, every conversation had been about deals, profits, or strategy. Even his ex-wife had eventually seen only dollar signs when she looked at him. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. In this modest diner, with this waitress who didn't know his net worth, he felt more seen than he had in years. But Claire was wrestling with her own demons, and the weight of decision was crushing her from both sides. James watched Claire's internal struggle and felt something shift inside him. The rain had stopped, and moonlight now streamed through the diner windows, casting everything in a softer light. "You're testing me, aren't you?" Claire said suddenly, her eyes narrowing with realization. "This isn't really about the money at all." James's carefully constructed facade cracked. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his voice betrayed him. "A man doesn't walk into a random diner at midnight and offer a stranger $1 million unless he's looking for something money can't buy," Claire said, moving closer. "You want to see if there's anyone left in this world who wouldn't sell their soul. You want to know if places like this, people like me, still exist." James felt exposed, as if she'd peered directly into his heart. "My company is buying this entire block," he admitted quietly. "The diner is scheduled for demolition in 6 months. I came here tonight to see what I was destroying." Claire's face went pale. "You're taking Murphy's away." It wasn't a question. James nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "But I can make it worth your while. The $1 million stands. You can start fresh somewhere else, somewhere better." Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Somewhere better? You still don't get it, do you? She walked to the wall of photographs and touched one gently. A picture of her late husband in his army uniform, taken right here in this booth before his last deployment. This is where Tommy proposed to me 20 years ago. This is where I announced my pregnancy to my parents. This is where I came every morning after his funeral, because the people here held me up when I couldn't stand on my own. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You can't put a price on a lifetime of memories. James felt his world tilting. All his life, he'd believed everything could be quantified, bought, or sold. What if I don't buy the block? He whispered. What if I walk away from the deal? Claire turned to him with surprise. You'd do that? Give up millions in profit? For the first time all evening, James smiled genuinely. Maybe it's time I learned what's really valuable. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Claire reached across the space between them, not for his money or his promises, but simply to touch his hand with the kind of human connection he'd forgotten existed. The real question now was, could a billionaire truly change his ways? 3 months later, James Richardson stood before his board of directors with a decision that would change everything. I'm withdrawing from the downtown redevelopment project, he announced, watching their shocked faces. Instead, we're establishing the Murphy's Community Foundation, dedicated to preserving neighborhood gathering places across the city. The room erupted in protests, but James held up his hand. Sometimes the best investment isn't the one that shows immediate returns on paper. That evening, he returned to the diner where it all began. Claire greeted him with the same warm smile, but now it held recognition and something deeper, respect earned through actions rather than wealth. The usual, she asked, and James realized he had become exactly what he'd never expected, a regular customer who came not for business deals or networking, but for genuine human connection. I've been thinking about what you said that first night, James told her as she poured his coffee. About understanding what really helps people. Claire settled into the booth across from him, something she never would have done 3 months ago. And what did you figure out? He gestured around the diner, where Mrs. Henderson was sharing photos of her new great-grandchild, where teenage Kevin was showing off his acceptance letter to college, where a dozen small human dramas played out over cups of coffee and shared conversations. I figured out that wealth isn't about how much you can accumulate, James said thoughtfully. It's about how much you can give back to make the world a little warmer, a little kinder. Claire nodded, understanding passing between them like an old friendship. My mother used to say that we're only as rich as the love we leave behind. James had started coming in 3 times a week, not just for the coffee but for the community he'd never known he was missing. The foundation had already saved 4 other neighborhood establishments, each one a gathering place where people mattered more than profit margins. James had learned to measure success differently, in the number of elderly customers who had someone to talk to, in the teenagers who found mentorship over midnight snacks, in the families who marked their milestones in worn vinyl booths that held decades of memories. You know what the funny thing is? Claire said, refilling his cup one more time. You never did get your answer that first night. James smiled, understanding now what she meant. Actually, I did, he replied. You taught me that some things can't be bought because they're already priceless. As he prepared to leave, James left his usual tip, not extravagant, just fair, along with a small envelope containing photos of the latest community center the foundation had helped fund. Claire watched him walk to his car, no longer the lost billionaire who'd stumbled in from the rain, but a man who'd found his way home to what truly mattered. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovering that the richest moments in life are often found in the simplest places, shared with people who remind us of our own humanity.